John, my first question is why do astronauts' health deteriorates when they go into outer space? Like, how did you discover that they are experiencing such debilitating effects?
I was hired by NASA, first of all, because of my stress research. My research was in stress and how the brain regulates the stress response and the hormones that are produced during stress. And I was teaching pharmacology, which is my degree. It's pharmacology from the University of London. And my degree and my research was in stress. So when NASA, they asked me if I would join NASA. And I said, why me? How come? What do I know about it? Well, nobody knew anything about what would happen to humans in space. And but they thought if you take a human and you put him on top of a launch rocket, it must be stressful. So based on that, they hired me. And that's how my career in NASA began. What was interesting is that at first, during Gemini 7, which was the first time we measured anything from the astronauts, it was urine mostly, and we measured steroids in the urine to see how their stress response was. Well, the steroids increased during launch, it increased during re-entry, but during flight, it was very low. It was much lower than it is normally here on Earth. And everyone said to me, it must be wrong. You must have made a mistake. They could not believe it. I could not believe it. The problem was, here I am, they hired me for my stress research and there's no stress. So I thought, this is the end of a beautiful career. So I started looking at other aspects of health in space and how it would relate. And gradually I asked, what is different about space? Well, the most different thing is the relative absence or diminution of gravity. It's not zero gravity, it is 10 to the minus 5. Now, you can explain that to people. Most people don't know what 10 to the minus 5 is. But 10 to the minus 5 is gravity in Earth orbit, in the microgravity around the Earth. On Earth, we say there's one, so it's an entity of one. And so everything is relative to that 1g. 1g on Earth, when we stand up, pulls from head to toe in one direction only, towards the center of the Earth. So we have evolved, we have been born, we have evolved, we have developed in 1g. As we move in the 1g environment, as we move around, we expose all our body, all parts of our body to this 1g in different ways. G does not change, gravity does not change. We move around it and expose our body differently to gravity. And this gravity, from the time we are born, and in the mother, in the uterus of the mother, it is microgravity, it is weightlessness, it is almost no gravity. The minute you're born, this womb force is pulling you down, and you're born head first, so you're head down, and you're being pulled down to the center of the Earth. Big shock, big surprise. And gradually, we have to learn to live and develop in this environment and adapt our movements, our health, our body to the 1g. So gravity is very instrumental in the way we develop. It takes us a year to learn how to stand up. So it's not instant. And then we gradually develop over say 20 years, where we probably reach peak development. And from then on, some people call it aging, but it isn't. It's a progression of age. And depending on what we do and how we live relative to gravity, we can deteriorate fast, or we can not deteriorate at all, or we can deteriorate very slowly. So when the people say, oh, it's genes, it has nothing to do with genes. Genes are important, but not how old you are, how fat you are, how stupid you are. Maybe how stupid you are is related to genes, but your physiology very much not influenced by your genetic code. So we, depending on what we do from 20 on, determines how healthy we are for the rest of our life. And that's what I learned by studying astronauts. Why and how? Because in order to study astronauts, we didn't have enough of them to draw conclusions. So we had to find a simulation model. And the simulation model, one of them was to sit in water. The first simulation model was to sit in water up to the neck. But you can't sit for too many hours. They sat up to 6 hours. And the response to sitting in water is very much the same as the first hours in space. But you can't sit for many hours. You have to sleep and so on. And there was one experiment done for 48 hours in water, and they went a bit crazy. It's because of sensory deprivation in water. That your senses aren't interacting with the environment. So we had to find a model that you could use to study the effects over a long period of time. So the Germans and the Russians came up with the idea that, well, if I am standing upright, gravity is pulling in one direction only, downward. But if I lie down, gravity is here. So gravity is pulling across my chest only. So from this to this, it is diminishing the influence of gravity. Gravity is not changing, but by changing my attitude to gravity, I'm reducing its influence. And this change in influence, reducing the influence of gravity, produces over a long period of time, produces directly and after a long period of time, changes that are similar to being in space. It just takes a little longer to produce them. But you can see changes by lying in bed within an hour. And certainly the first few days is very rapid changes, like a reduction in blood volume. Because the body is saying, I don't need all this blood, it's up here anyway. So I don't need all this blood, I get rid of it. Urine excretion increases. And gradually, I don't need these muscles because I'm not working against gravity, not pulling down. I don't need the circulation. I don't need a heart that is big. I only need a little heart to pump blood, because blood is not going to my feet like it used to. It's just to pump it up to the head doesn't take very much effort. So everything changes and things become sluggish. And in summary, without gravity, with less gravity, we waste. Compared to what we are on Earth, we waste. For space, it's adapted. That's correct for space. But if we are comparing it to what we are on Earth, we need as much muscle, so we lose it. We don't need as much bone, we lose it. Our heart gets smaller because we don't need it. Our blood volume is less because we don't need it. So in general, all the changes that happen are changes that we see with wasting. And these changes, I realized just by watching volunteers that we put in bed, that the changes are similar to those we are used to thinking are aging. It's not aging, it's just the changes that accompany aging. So that's where, we got this comparison with aging, which was a big surprise to everybody at first. Again, like the stress, they said, it's not possible. What are you saying? The astronauts grow old in space? I said, well, yeah, sort of. And it's not that they are incapable, but they are adapted to that environment. So when we get to 20, if we stop using gravity, we used gravity from 0 to 20 to grow up, to get strong, to pull ourselves up. And then after that, we learned how to do it. So we don't need as much help. So we don't need the muscle and we don't need the bone like we do on Earth and when we're growing up. So we start wasting, and you can draw the curve, and we call it aging. But it isn't aging, it is just because we're not using our environment. It's lovely to be on bnsgokugreat. It's a new experience for me, and I'm delighted to be interviewed by you.